even Israel, it was the diaspora population that provided much of the impetus, both in terms of critical skills and capital. Today, the remittances abroad, including those of our diaspora population, the remittances are not only from the diaspora, but let's even, for the sake of argument, ascribe it all to the diaspora. It's about $22 billion the last time counted. Almost nearly the size of the federal budget. So they could become that. But you know what? We run the risk of losing this diaspora because of what I call the bleaching syndrome. In other words, if you get to the US, get to anywhere in the world, you'll find a Jew. They speak their language, they maintain the network, even the third, fourth, and with their names even, you know who they are. When you call them, you know it's a Jewish name. If you have an Indian, even third, fourth, fifth generation in the US, the guy has an accent because the first language he speaks is Hindi, in the Indian land, at home. Then before he learns English. Now, what that means is that this kid, by even the name, once you call it Ravi or Gandhi or this, that's all. By the name, by the language, permanently is connected to the main land. Even if the great-great-great-grandchildren decide to go back to India or to China or to anywhere and so on, or to Israel, they go to Israel, they can speak the Hebrew, and so on and so forth. Look at the crisis with us. In our own case, the first generation immigrants travel and they get to the US or wherever. The first is that, I call it bleaching syndrome. You know what bleaching does? Somebody who suffers from bleaching is somebody who has an inferiority complex about the way he or she looks, and thinks that by bleaching, taking away denying who he is, and looking closer to the other person, he will be more accepted. Are you getting me? So our first generation people, migrants, get there. I say they suffer from this complex. If the name is Chukuma, he starts saying it's Chok. Because, and you ask him why, he says, so that it will be easy for the white people to pronounce. But the white guy answers Schwarzenegger. If you can write it now, you can write it. Schwarzenegger, and he forces you to know how to pronounce Schwarzenegger. Now, the guy answers, no, there's a different dimension to it. He says, maybe while he was here in Nigeria, all of us, we know him as Chidi. Beautiful name. Nobody ever knew him by his English name. He shows up there, he goes to resurrect one name that Sebastian, that gave him as a baptismal name. That's now what he now answers. And you show up and you're looking for Chidi. No, he's now Sebastian. It's no longer Chidi. And you know what? Go back to historic times. Why I think this is very important, because this is part of the cultural identity and this linkage to sustainable development. When they took our forefathers as slaves, the strategy was change their identity, change their name, change their language, you disorient them from the fatherland, and forever they will be floating. So you say your name is Wanko, from now on you are now Mr. Stone. Start answering Mr. Stone. This your language, you people are speaking in vernacular, stop that. The language is English. And over time, their own children grew up to answer Mr. Stone, somebody Stone. And then from there, generations coming, they have no roots. So if you ask the black Americans, they simply describe themselves as African American. Because if these guys continue with their original names, we will now be able to trace their roots. To say this was an Igbo man, this is a Yoruba man, this is Ghanaian. but they have no sense of that. In America today, even the whites, by their names, they will still know that it's German American, it's Irish American, it's Greek American. Even after several generations and hundreds of years, we run the risk of losing the contributions of our own diaspora because of this bleaching syndrome. And this bleaching syndrome is most powerful, especially for those of us from this part of the world. And I don't know, I can't remember what traditional ruler said, so our people, and so for me, there are global dysfunctionalities, the global trade wars and positioning to capture the flying geese. The Chinese, the average labor cost is rising in China, and they are looking for cheaper places to produce their goods. Nigeria, this is an opportunity. We could well position ourselves with cheaper labor, if it is a productive labor, to be able to do that. Africa is trying to integrate through the common, Africa's common free trade area, as the case may be. Let me now come to what I consider the heart of this message. We've done the diagnosis, the challenges, the opportunities, but let's talk about how do we framing the future. And I want to make a few background remarks on this. First is the context and focus. Focus is very, very essential if we want to be impactful, if we want public policy to be impactful. Let's fast forward to 2030. Nigeria doesn't need to repeat the errors of the past plans with bogus goals and targets. We can't deal with the 169 targets, then you get nowhere. You get what I'm saying? I remember it was my successor who, when he was going for confirmation hearing, and the government of Yar'Adua was talking about 7-point agenda, and he was asked, what do you do for Nigerian economy? He said, reduce that 7-point agenda to 1-point agenda. So I will try something probably just to get you thinking in some sense here. To focus on the 17 SDGs means failure already. We don't want to see, we don't want to use that to frame public policy. Our population, like I said, 400 million, approaching 300 million by 2030, estimated 400 by 2050, about 752 million by 2100. Thank God I would have been gone, far gone. A practical and pragmatic sustainable development, ladies and gentlemen, in my view, and this is where I deliver my message and I will elaborate a few more, is to look at that population, approximately getting to 300 by 2030. Let's try to imagine the 400 by 2050 and work backwards. And the question is, how will this number of people in this tiny piece of land, ladies and gentlemen, safely and happily prosper sustainably in this particular area with dwindling resources? Which water are they even going to be drinking? We're talking about dredging the Niger. This water is coming from Futajalon Mountain. What if those people, with the desert and so on, giving them problems, they decide to dam it, to supply them with water, and River Niger dries up? Okay? It dries up because the water is not originating from here. It's coming from somewhere else and emptying into the Atlantic. The surge of these 400 million people are just trying to feed them into this country where they can be. the challenge of sustainable development must focus around these 300, 400 million people and how do they survive sustainably. My thesis, therefore, is that if there is any such a thing as a silver bullet for sustainable development, I will bet my money on human capital as the silver bullet for sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, human capital is Nigeria's real but dormant wealth. Appropriately transformed, it is worth millions of times the value of our natural resources. Our human capital is our next oil, more than oil, far greater than oil. I talked about remittances a moment ago. Human capital could become Nigeria's biggest export in years to come, appropriately harnessed and prepared. Because I can't see these 400 million people fitting in here, or 752 million people fitting here. Third largest in the world by 2050 and going forward. As we are approaching the end of the century, the 21st century, the population in the Western world will be declining. Where will the labor force or the population for those countries come from? Are we getting somewhere? Yes. Okay. Africa will account for about, by the 21st, end of this century, Africa is estimated to account for 40% of the world population, or 4.4 billion people. Africa. Actually, between Africa and Asia, you are going to have about 83% of the world population. America will be declining. Europe will be declining with aging population. Many of these countries are not able to reproduce their population today. Their fertility rate declining. People are cohabiting with no children. Even when they have a child, is one. With all these hormone and all those things around now being legalized everywhere, there's no more care for children. They're looking for children to adopt, and who is going to be the one that you will adopt? So, if we strategically prepare our biggest resource, which is human beings, if we strategically prepare them, they can become our largest exports. Today, Philippines dominates the world nanny market. Nannies. They dominate it. Is that? You can imagine the tens of billions of remittances every year. People are going from Nigeria here, some rich men, to Philippines to get domestic workers. They are trained for that. How are we strategically positioning our own population to take over Europe and take over America? Because my own forecast, my own projection is that if current trend in the world continues, and Africa can strategically position itself, this century will be China's and India's century. But Africa can prepare that the next century, the 22nd century, will be dominated by Africa, and by the 23rd century, much of the world will be dominated and populated as well by Africa. But we must begin today, walk backwards. The world will not need illiterates. That's the point. You get my point? They will not need illiterates. They will need a population that is prepared for that. And my hypothesis, my thesis is that this human capital encapsulates the three dimensions of sustainable development, which is social, economic, and environmental. It is only the economic part is self-evident. Much of the social goals will also be accomplished if you have skilled and knowledgeable population. It is only those who are also skilled and knowledgeable that will deal with the environment. How can you go and be preaching to an illiterate woman who has nothing, no knowledge about not cutting the trees? I mean, that's the only thing. You got to depend on that, you got to cut it down. Or to stop flooding because it contributes to whatever. I mean, you got to be cuckoo to be talking to her about that. She doesn't understand what you're talking about. For her, it is survival. So, human capital, any society that is going to claim the 21st century and the 22nd century on a sustainable basis, in my view, will be a society that is with population that is knowledgeable, skilled, and with an inclusive stock of human capital. The Scandinavian countries, I'm glad one of our speakers has come from Sweden. I want to recommend a book. It's written by Thomas Friedman, 2012. The title of the book, Pass the Book, Hold the Oil. Pass the book, hold the oil. And this book showed with examples of countries like Taiwan, for example. No natural resources, but dependent on its 20-something million population, transformed population, and they're able to build world-class cities and society. Take Israel. Take Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and so on. These are countries who give us examples today. The thing that made them great, continues to make them great, is what? Human capital. We got to start planning for Nigeria without oil. And for me, human capital is the next oil. In practice, obviously, government will always pay attention to other issues in public policy. But if the issue is sustainable development, ladies and gentlemen, and I have got just $1 to spend, if you ask me to allocate it, I will put at least 60% of the 60 cents out of the $1 on human capital. The key point is that we have binding resource constraints. We can sprinkle all over, but without any impact. And still framing this future, therefore, if I then summarize this human capital element for Nigeria, and I'm thinking, if I were to ask somebody, can we focus this, refocus this, leave 17 goals of the SDGs, let's reduce them to 3, to no more than 5. What would they be? In my view, 3 of them, I will amend them. 3 SDGs, I will amend them appropriately to focus on human capital. The first, I will say, set one goal to ensure access to effective and affordable health care for all. The key words are access, effective, and affordable health care for all. Number 2, to ensure qualitative 21st century education and continuous lifelong skill enhancement for all. Ladies and gentlemen, the way technology is going today, the educational system is going to completely change in a few decades to come. People in years to come will be in their workplaces and in their homes and receiving live lectures going on. And you could have a point where one lecturer is giving this discussion that we're having now, could be transmitted live, iPod, and people are watching it maybe 1 billion people could be going through the same thing live at the same time. That would be the nature of education that we need. And number 3, promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth plus full and productive employment for all. Ladies and gentlemen, if we focus on these 3, we would have gone on the road to sustainable development. And interestingly, the 3rd one is part of the 17. The 2 are also part of the 17 but framed differently. I cannot understand why you would have number 3, inclusive and sustainable economic growth plus full and productive employment for all, and you are still putting things about climate and so on. I mean, sustainable economic growth means you're already taking care of environmental and climatic issues, isn't it? And that's why people criticize the 17 SDGs as being too obtuse, confusing, conflicting, and so on and so forth. I will only add 2 more to this for Nigeria's specific case. 2 more that I will add will be number 4, end corruption and insecurity in all their forms. Let's add them to the SDGs. It's not part of it. End corruption and insecurity in all their forms. And the governance thing. Okay? And 5, and the last, I will say, restructure the governance architecture to ensure sustainable, competitive, and productive federalism. If we get these 5 done, we will be laying solid foundation to sustainable development. My key thing is the KISS principle. KISS. K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore was asked, what's the miracle of Singapore? And he said, there is no miracle. The miracle is get a few things right and keep doing them right. So let's focus on a few, 5, not 17. With 169 targets. We'll go nowhere. If nobody would even remember them. How many persons remember even the 17, let alone 169 targets? Nobody will. So, 2030 we will launch another one. We will only say we missed it again. So, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that the education we talk about is not just the formal one. Because this university is located in the southeast, I might give this example. It's not just the formal education. Igbos have the largest incubation of the largest venture capital incubation center, pockets of them around. And as they train these guys, they are dispatching them around the world. You've heard about the Alaba market, the main market, the Aba area market, all these markets everywhere. This is our apprenticeship system. It's unique to us. Somebody once told me that if you spend 5 years at main market or Onisha, somebody comes with a PhD, you sell him. They're trying to tell me that the kind of skills and wisdom and street survivalist skills that they acquire surviving in main market, come on, you can be a professor, you come there, we'll sell you. And these guys, they mean business. If you travel around Africa, and this is the point I was making about preparing our population as exports. If you travel around Africa, all over Africa, you now see new populations emerging from Nigeria. I was in Kinshasa, Congo at some point, some years ago, and they took me to a street They call it the Nigerian street. And you could drive for almost a kilometer. And you know what is being sold left and right of the street? Motor spare parts. You got it right. And I conducted an experiment. I stopped. Former Deputy Foreign Minister was taking me around. I stopped, I said, let me just try an experiment, and we were walking. I randomly entered 10 of those shops. Counted 10. And I'll enter into one of them, any one of them, and then will come in and say, nah, I will look at you, smile, all the money. Then, if you say that they were dealing on Mazda, then you start asking for Lincoln Navigator spare parts. And trust our people. You know that he has written that it's Mazda parts. You are asking for, you wanted him to tell you, okay, I don't have it, so that you pass. But you know, these guys will never tell you that they don't. So, at that point, you want Lincoln Navigator, you say, okay, have a seat. It is in the store. Was only in one of them that I was a lady. I suspect it must be a sales girl. And I came there and I spoke to Gedo. She smiled. And I said, Adema, you know, in an accent that I knew it wasn't. I said, okay. So after going through the test, all without fail spoke fluent Igbo to me. And I told the guy who was taking me around, my deputy foreign minister, that is, I know where they come from. I can speak their language. But the thing is that the power of language, identity, and connection back to the mainland. This message, if you miss it, if we miss it as a people, we'll be missing what will futuristically turn out to be the most important source of our sustainable development. But let me, in ending, say that, ladies and gentlemen, you without meritocracy. You cannot. There was a video on WhatsApp circulated a few weeks ago. And that's a man who had lived in Singapore for 70 years. And he was just reminiscing on what they call the secrets of the Singapore. And one of the key, apart from pragmatism, he mentioned three things. One is pragmatism, they were very pragmatic. But they talked about meritocracy, competence. They sought out and recruited the best in their public service. They sought out and recruited the best even in government. The founding president, Lee Kuan Yew, went to the best universities in the world, recruited the best talents, and put them through the political process to contest the elections, go to the village, and learn how to tie the wrapper and dance with the locals, and so that they could see firsthand the problems of the people. And then in turn, they became parliamentarians, they went into government. So their cabinet was just filled with the best and nothing but the best. But you can't, even for human capital development, it's even more critical, ladies and gentlemen. And we're having this conversation, I think the Vice Chancellor alluded to it, and the Dean. I think last night up until this morning in the Vice Chancellor's office, about the place of meritocracy. You can't go home without it. I recall, I was just talking about my days at the University of Nigeria as an undergraduate, and even as a postgraduate student. We had lecturers from Poland, from, I think the other one was from Yugoslavia, Mizinski, Dr. Sadowska, Dr. Mizinski, Indians. My supervisor as an undergraduate was Dr. Ghosh, an Indian, whose first degree was mathematics, second degree mathematics, and PhD economics. And the one who taught me mathematical economics and econometrics was also Dr. Mighty, an Indian, who had also training economics, maths, statistics, economics. So he's training. But today, I look down the concept of a university, the universal nature of it. And maybe I'm giving an illustration with the university because we're in a university setting. And I can see many of the speakers are also university professors and so on. Maybe it's appropriate to use the university system. Part of the challenge, what stops us from moving is what I call the villagization of institutions. Maybe you won't find this in the dictionary. If you type it, the Word document will underline it as read, and it won't find anything in the dictionary. But this is very serious. Public institutions have become about who is from my village. Take Nigeria as an example. As globally, there are many parts of the country without qualified teachers. Take global Nigeria. Why would we not have a national policy, for example, that recruits the best qualified teachers from all over the country to be able to teach everywhere in the country? Why would you, if you are sick, I don't know who ever gets sick and insists that the medical doctor that will attend to him or her must be the doctor from his village. Why must you then insist that the person who will teach your own children must be the one from your village? But let me say that the man in the street just doesn't care. It is us, the elite. It is us, the elite, who either in recruitment of teachers think it is something to do favor to somebody. You go and recruit because you go to the village, the man or the woman is harassing you. See my paper. He said, what do you want to do? I don't, anything. First of all, he says anything. He said, but then he said, just fix me somewhere. Now, I tell you my personal experience. My personal experience, I said to people, I don't recommend lecturership position. I don't. Said to me to go and talk to Vice Chancellor to recruit me. And I said, because that's not the way I grew. I also became a lecturer in my department, and I knew how we were. I became a secretary of the departmental board, and I knew how we recruited lecturers. The rigorous process that it went. Even your potentials, before you finish your master's, will see your capacity even to publish. It was the best. You went out to seek out the best. Because for me, the litmus test for me personally is, would I be proud for this person to teach my child? That's the litmus test. If you want to teach in the Department of Economics, Medicine, or whatever thing and so on, and some even medicine, they come to you to say, talk to X, Y, Z. You know it's Niger now. I said, if they don't find you qualified to teach in medicine, and they recruit you because I said so, and next tomorrow my child has an accident and you are the one to operate on him because you are holding a big title there. Now, just think of it. It is said, if you want to know, predict the future of a society, look at the nature of its educational institutions. And the only way this country can move forward with sustainable human capital that will move Nigeria to the next level is through an educational system that emphasizes nothing and nothing but merit. Merit, merit, merit. And therefore, I end on this note by saying, you as the conference, as you deliberate on the sustainable development agenda for the country, everybody will throw in his own bit. Oh, if only you did this, if only you did this. You can see for me, I was trying to look for frame it around a silver bullet. Human capital. As you deal with sustainable development, one of the things people will look out to get out from you is the concept of measurements. How would you measure these things? How would I measure one if I say it? It's not the grammar. And for policy makers, they'll be asking you for any proposal you make, how? How will it be done? How can you break it down in 2 minutes to the guy, do this? They were to ask me how we were going to get it all over the country. I know that in some parts of the country, especially in the East here, the stock of human capital is quite high. Look at the number of those of them graduating from universities, getting entrances in JAM, especially Imo State. I think that probably has the highest, as it were. Why wouldn't they be the ones teaching in Zamfara, Yobe, and so on and so forth? The poor woman doesn't care where the teacher of the child comes from. What the poor illiterate woman cares is that the child receives the best education. At Niger Sen, I was telling them last night, my primary one, my teacher was from Mr. Agowa from Mbise. My primary two, I was taught by Mr. Odo, I think Kaleha. I don't know which local government. It's from Kaleha. That's correct. Primary three, I was taught by Mrs. Megrim from Owen. Class 4, and then he met me also in class 5, was Mr. Nwokwa from Ngwa in Niger State. And then my class 6, Mr. Chukuneke from Ihiala in the current Anambra State. Now, these were the people who taught me in primary school. In today's world, I'm not sure if we go back to that same primary school. Even in Southeast here, people were dislodged from one state the other day and told they are non-Indian. And I want to leave us to say, the principal, your vice chancellor, excited us this morning when we had the courtesy call with what you guys are trying to do here. The power of personal examples. And I want to say to all of us, yes, there are challenges everywhere. There will always be. The challenges are humongous, and we hope that those in charge will get to them. But you know what? We say that as you point one finger forward, the others are pointing back at you. And what I often say to people is, just to borrow the Vice Chancellor's phrase again, your personal example. Mother Teresa said, you may not be able to change the world, but at the minimum, change yourself. If we all emphasize and live out that this country can truly be great, not just third in the world in terms of population, but can and has all the potentials to be in the top 7 at the close of this century in terms of the economy, in terms of the power of the economy. But you can't go anywhere without having the best in the best of places and the best teaching our children. And the elite come out of this shell, that the elite will send our children to schools where they are taught even by foreigners. We don't care where their teachers are coming from. But for the children of the poor and helpless, we send to them people we are recruiting in order to just somewhere. I think that thing is what we must deal with. For sustainable development, therefore, at the individual level, my message is be the change that you want to see. Thank you very much.
Footage.